Welcome to another exciting episode of the Rolewise podcast. Today, we're diving into Daggerheart, the fantasy tabletop role playing game published by Darrington Press and currently in an open beta playtest. We've had a chance to crack open the manuscript and give the current version a go. And now that we've had a chance to digest how the adventure went, we're here to share our thoughts. So if you want to watch the adventure, we do live streams on Mondays, usually around 8:30 Pacific. We actually did it this last week, so I don't know how that's all going to look in the episode thing. But just look up our Daggerheart #2 episode, and you'll basically see how the live play went, kind of how we stumbled, how we had fun, and all of those kind of things, and all that. So, but first, in case you haven't, if you're clicking this video and you've never heard of Daggerheart, what is Daggerheart? In Daggerheart, brave heroics and vibrant worlds come alive. This is kind of their sales pitchy kind of stuff. This game is not just about rolling the dice, but about creating a shared story that shapes the world. Using 2d12, aka the duality dice system, you see how hope and fear can tip the scales of fate, driving character focused narratives. Now, they do put a lot of emphasis on character creation, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But it is a fairly, it is kind of still in a fairly raw form. So I thought tonight we would start with just the duality dice. That's kind of the meat and potatoes of Daggerheart. So, as seasoned gamers, what are your initial impressions of the duality dice system and its impact on gameplay, guys?
I have mixed feelings. Not because I didn't like the mechanic. I actually think I do like the mechanic,
Mhm.
but we have a really small sample size. We played a one shot, and I believe that Brent and I statistically rolled more rolls with hope than with fear, and they should, on a large enough sample size, wind up being the same, right? Because you're rolling 2d12, one's hope and one's fear.
Well, I mean, it should technically be in Hope's favor because only if your fear die is higher does it count as a
Oh,
roll with
right.
fear,
No,
right?
well, I guess
So,
if if they're the same, I guess that's a positive outcome
mhm,
because that's a critical success.
yeah.
But I think that if we would have tracked it, and maybe we should have, I think we were probably more like 70-30 instead of, you
It
know,
definitely felt like it swung,
55-45 or
didn't it?
something like that. Yeah. But the mechanic helps generate uh it's another currency to manage. So
Mhm,
I mean, there's a gamification of the system there, but it does give you a chance to do certain cool, epic type things. Both the players, in
mhm,
the case of hope, and the GM in the case of fear. Right?
mhm.
Gives the GM more currency. Um, I liked the way it played out once we finally started realizing that, yeah, I need to spend some of these points that I'm accumulating. Or
Yeah.
once I did, I'm not speaking for Brent. But I kind of liked it, but I think I would need to play more to make a final determination.
Well, my
And
character didn't have much to spend hope on. Is one of the things, the problems that ran in with my character.
well,
But
maybe
go
what
ahead.
I should do is before we go farther, I should explain what the duality dice system are a little bit
Sure.
more thoroughly. So,
Okay.
so just so people are aware, so what you do with Daggerheart is you roll 2d12 when you're rolling for your action rolls, and one dice is going to be signified as your hope dice, one dice is going to be signified as your fear dice, and if your hope dice rolls higher than your fear dice or equal to your fear dice, you basically are rolling with hope. If it's a match, if it's doubles, basically, then it's a critical success. But if you roll the fear dice and it's higher than your hope dice, then it is considered with fear. Now, when you guys roll with hope, you get to track a mechanic called hope, and it's a very liquid mechanic that you're expected to spend. However, if you roll with fear, then I, as the GM, get to make moves, and of course, I get a token. We were using fear balls during our game um, that allowed me to make more consequential moves
Right.
using the DM meta currency.
And
So
I think it's important to point out that you can have a success even if you roll with fear, even if the
correct.
fear dice is higher,
Mhm.
because it's the total of the two dice that
Mhm.
determines whether you succeed or fail.
Correct, and it's usually against a target number or a set, or there may be a set difficulty, or it may be a target number determined by the DM. So you can succeed with fear, which means you still succeed at your task. But I get more fear balls. Mm. I can play with later. So yeah, we'll probably stop using that term.
Nah, fear balls. I think it's perfect.
It's what it is. So yeah, so skipping back over to you, Brent. What were your initial impressions of the duality dice system and its impact on gameplay?
I think it's like I didn't have a problem with it. I think it's fine.
Mhm.
It is a currency that you have to measure, so it does make for a little bit of tinkering in the background. But there isn't a lot. Like it's only I think you're capped out at 5, unless you have some sort of battle scar, and then it lowers your cap. Right?
Mhm.
Is that how the
Yeah,
scars
so
work?
scars did lower it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, my character didn't have a ton to use their hope on, so I had a lot pretty often. I think it's anytime you have a currency that your character can spend to do cool shit. I think it's good for your character. I think that's good.
Mhm.
I like action points or victory points in Fallout. I like them in Conan, and these kind of mirror that sort of mechanic. So I like that. The fear mechanic. I think the fear mechanics. I like the fear mechanic. I think it's a little weird. In that I think if you're newer to running a game, you're
Mhm.
going to have problems knowing when to spend fear,
Mhm.
and potentially confrontation with your players if you spend fear. You overspend fear. For example, in the adventure that we played, your ability to just like summon skeletons for like 1 fear token. I mean, there's no real reason for you not to do that all the time. If you're not aware that you're trying to write more of a narrative than
Mhm.
like have a combat. Like the idea is to use it only when it's interesting, not to just abuse it. And it's something that you could easily abuse accidentally, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah.
could. I think the other fear for me is like, especially as a new GM, I with new currencies, I think people tend to do one of two things. They spend it too freely, which could potentially wind up in an accidental abuse, or they hoard it too. They treat it as it's too precious a commodity, and they don't use it enough. And then after the session, they're like, "Oh, I could have made that more interesting by doing this."
What I would be more worried about is somebody hoarding it, like in earlier adventures, and then knowing it's the last adventure, and your GM just being like, "Here it all
M-
comes."
Murdering the whole party.
Yeah, here
I'm
it
going to
all
do
comes.
something cool, guys.
Yeah, and I have all this fear to spend, and I'm just gonna spend it. This will make the
Yeah.
combat really cool.
Does it disappear between sessions, Mike, or is it a pool that
I I don't
I
recall.
didn't read?
I think I would be surprised if it did because I don't think your hope disappears between sessions. But it may. I mean it
But I mean, even if it does, like look at
Mhm.
what we played. Like we had the two encounters, and you had some from that first encounter. So
That's
if you had
true.
just like saved it up for the one of the people in chat said that their GM had 7 fear going into their playthrough of
Yeah.
the final encounter, and like you could just be
No, that
like,
would have been horrifying because I was contemplating my own mortality there for
yeah, you could
just a
just be like,
moment in that last
and
conflict.
if you're not care, you're like, oh, I have all this fear and I'm going to spend it because that'll make the combat more fun.
Mhm.
Like you have to be very aware of that. Like it gives you an ability to really throw things for a loop. It's sort of like CR, and the first time you do a Dungeons and Dragons thing and you're using CR, and like you're like, oh, these are all level CR1 creatures. I'm going to have 20 of them. And then your party just gets murdered because action economy is a thing.
Yeah. No, it's true, and I think that I think we can talk about the meta currencies and their liquidity a little bit more, because I think the real heart of the question is that do you look at the duality dice and do you feel like it enabled kind of their fiction first mission? Because they seem like they're going for fiction more than they're going
I
for
I think it
mechanical.
kind of did.
And so I'm just curious if you guys felt it actually helped enable a fiction laden gameplay experience or a narrative laden experience rather than a mechanical one.
Well, maybe it was just the combination of having the hope currency and then, not having a rigid initiative structure.
Mhm.
Where like there was a couple of times where I was able to do a series of attacks um that honestly felt kind of heroic. Even now, even 3 days removed from playing,
Mhm.
I still have, those are moments that felt really good as a player, and that felt in line with my character, and that the gaming system helped create.
Mhm.
So I think you can,
Mhm.
and I also think that some of the stuff that you were able to do with the fear, did the same thing, and that currency is created out of the duality dice. Are there other ways to do that? Sure, there probably are. There's probably other mechanics that you could use that could
Yeah.
do that, but there's not a lot of games where you can chain together attacks, because you get to do so many things on your turn, and then your turn ends, and then it's the next person in initiative's turn, whether it's the party or the monsters, for
Mhm.
lack of a better term. You know what I mean? And so that isn't an option in a lot of games, and it was kind of fun, but it took me wanting to push my luck to a degree. It took Brent, and as part of my party, because we had the initiative, not
Mhm.
going, no, I'm going to step in now. It took you deciding not to spend the fear, to interrupt things. I don't know.
Yeah. But in short, you felt like the
Yes,
duality dice did it enable like a narrative
I
experience.
I I, I thought they did, because I thought
Yeah.
some of the stuff, the way that I described it and played it, felt. I mean, it felt. Am I wrong?
No, I think
I
the
thought it was kind
duality
of
dice.
cool.
I think the duality dice are a good currency for doing cool shit, just like victory points or anything like that. I think that's an interesting mechanic.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I don't have any. I don't have any particular problem with the. I don't have any particular problem with the duality dice.
Good.
It's just a dice rolling mechanic. I don't know. It supports the type of game that they want to tell,
Mhm.
and I think that's like the important part of the rules.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's pretty important because I mean it felt like I felt like they were trying to thread this very, very narrow needle with it. They're just like, okay, I'm gonna really try to hit a very narrative gameplay D&D experience and still have it feel slightly crunchy. And I think we could use that to talk a little bit about characters and stuff like that because I did feel, because this is a system that's designed for longer gameplay experiences. I mean, they are taking the one to
Yeah,
10,
campaign play. Yeah, it's
and
campaign play game.
so yeah, they're going to do a campaign. So you're expected to do play from 1 to 10. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at the level up rules, but it seems like they have a progressive tiering system where each tier has different leveling abilities and how you
Yeah,
do it and what. And it seems like your power grows fairly quickly when you gain levels based on what I was seeing. So I thought that was pretty neat. But in terms of character creation, do you feel like you were able to create a character that felt pretty like I mean, you guys didn't really create characters because you used
Yeah, we didn't play
pre-generated
the
ones.
characters, so I don't necessarily know if
well,
we created. The character we created, I felt was neat, but
Mhm.
we didn't really play them, so I can't really judge how they are during the game. I don't think.
Yeah. But I mean, did you feel like there was variety and options and all that stuff? Because I mean,
Oh, there's
yes,
tons of options. Yeah.
yeah, because it felt like each class having two domains and having the ability to pick separate powers from each domain or one domain over the other. Your ancestry, your community, like it felt like you were making a lot of decisions that gave actual gameplay benefit too. So even on the
it did.
characters that were pre-generated, you saw that you had a lot of things that were coming together. The one thing that was interesting to me though is that I feel like when you played those pre-generated, it did show that you could make you could make unoptimized choices very easily. What do you guys think about that? Because I mean, and I'll toss this one to Brett first because it feels like when you chose that pre-generated character, you didn't necessarily understand what you were getting into, and then in the end, you didn't feel like,
Well, he was supposed to be a warrior, right? And I didn't feel
yeah,
didn't feel exceptionally tanky or like he didn't feel exceptionally guardian worthy or exceptionally damage worthy.
yeah.
His damage felt anemic, which might be just what melees feel like in the game. I don't know.
Well, said he
But
was
they're
supposed
also
to kill him with kindness or something like that. Was
yeah, he was more of a face character, and there wasn't really very many face opportunities in the game in the encounters, which might be something that plays out different differently later. But yeah, he was there wasn't very many instances to spend hope in my opinion, because like the one was I could re-roll anytime there was one where I could reroll anytime I missed with an attack using my, what are they called? The experiences.
Yeah, the experiences. Uh-huh.
And hit them harder was the experience, and I probably should just said I'm using it all. Basically, came up with a reason to use that every single time I swung my sword. And then I would have been able to re-roll every time. But like I said, that feels really gamey to me, and so I struggle with that sometimes. Where it's like, well, I'm gonna hit them as hard as I can because that's what I do. I hit them hard, and it was only a +1, so
it was secondary to your affability or whatever.
yeah, and then the second one, yeah, and his primary was the affability, which is a talky one, which is fine. But yeah, it, like I said, there's always that thing in these games, whereas if you make a character that's not good at combat, that's fine, but realize it's not going to be combat's not going to be as much fun. And if the game's about combat,
yeah,
2/3 of the time, it's not going to be as much fun for that person. Like I had fun, don't get me wrong. I was doing damage, but I was definitely more standing there so the wizard could AoE blow things up.
Yeah.
So which is fine. Which if he was better at that, I would have been more okay with that. Like the Guardian would have been. I think there's a class called Guardian, I think, and that seems like the class that probably should have been.
Well, another character had the Guardian class.
Yeah, that's the character I probably should have picked if I thought that was the case. I wasn't sure I wasn't sure the distinction between the warrior and the Guardian.
Yeah, I think it just in this particular case, this warrior was not strong on the physical warrioring.
Yeah, he wasn't,
because there are some pretty cool warrior abilities. Like
he wasn't built very well, I don't think. Frankly.
Or maybe he was built for a negotiation that was going to happen. Because you could obviously you could probably have role played situations and stuff, but you can run into unoptimized character builds pretty quick.
You can, and I think that's okay. If somebody really has a concept or a trope or something that they really want to do, I think the game, at least in character creation, allows you to create a lot of different characters, that might not be good in all situations.
Yeah, but yes, but in this case, the problem with the pre-order, I may have known that if I had designed the character, but the problem with the pre-generated,
they called it a warrior.
Didn't know that, yeah,
right.
And so if you're new and you're making a character, just be aware of that, and be aware that if it's a combat heavy game, talk to your GM. If you're running an unoptimized character, I always suggest talking to your GM, because the GM is going to have to do things in the game to make your unoptimized character shine.
Well, like if we had created the characters, we would have had more control over the experiences and how we created them, because you kind of create them with the GM, along with the flavor. And you may have wanted more chance to do this based on this thing in your background, and instead of something like affability.
Right. Yeah. Right. No, that's, we're in agreement on that, I think.
Yeah. And I just love that they had a character creator on Demiplane.
Yeah, that was also nice. That helped out a lot.
Yeah, it was
more
pretty
people
good.
Need to have character creators, especially if there is crunchy parts of your system, or there's a lot of choices that people have to make. It's much easier to read in that character creator than flipping back and forth in a PDF or a physical book. Between this and that, and this section and that section. The character creator is just hands down a godsend.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was very nice. Yeah,
it was nice to put a lot of that stuff digitally. And so, Jeff, I mean, you played a character that seemed like it was a little bit more optimized towards combat. It felt.
Yeah, I played the character that we had to have as part of the party. Somebody had to play it. I hadn't really looked at it. I just volunteered. Yeah, it's her adventure.
Yeah, it is kind of her adventure, which is good. It worked out.
Yeah, no, it did. But it took a while for me to understand, the spells and mechanics and because it's a new system. We'd never played it. But I certainly don't think she was overpowered, but I was, I had a few. The one thing that is, if everybody got in close where I could hit all of them as long as I succeeded on the to hit roll, that was a little on the
random blades or whatever.
Yeah. That was real nice. It wasn't an abusive amount of damage, but when instead of doing 8 damage to one character, I can do 8 damage to 5 characters. Suddenly it's 40 damage. Like that's a
I think
huge
it's
huge
necessary.
swing.
Yeah, it's necessary. It showed how powerful potentially like
Some of these things could be, yeah.
AoE stuff is going to be probably.
You know, and a couple of times, you know, Brent's character didn't have as many things to spend hope on, and a couple of times he's like, "I'm going to spend a hope to give you a D6 on your 2 hit."
Yeah,
you're trying to do a cool thing.
That is pretty nice. Like, I guess that is one thing that would be good about a character that isn't optimized for combat is you can always do that. You can always throw somebody, like inspiration. You always can throw them some extra help. So if you had some sort of support character, that's a nice addition.
Yeah,
is being able to use any hope that you generate to help other people.
Yeah, we only played 2 subclasses, you know, for 3.5 hours. You know, it's not like we have an exhaustive. Oh, I know what all these characters are like.
Well,
and
it's the quick start, so
yeah,
it doesn't really have like their expectations on what it is are, you know, it's not a done game, so some of the stuff may change. So
well, exactly, and I think that if I were to be honest in my expectations next, is I probably would play a game again with it down the road after something was a little bit closer to the finished product, or even just wait for the finished product to come out, because I don't think I need to be there at every version 1.3, version 1.4, and play testing all of that stuff. There's
I'll probably
people that are.
look at it, and maybe we'll decide to, if we see some changes, because there's still some things that felt a little odd to me. The damage abstraction system is the best I can call it.
Yeah,
because you literally have 6 hit points, and if you take severe damage, that's 3 of your hit points, so it's half of your health, whether you have 6 or 600. But it feels like one of those weird video gamey systems where we take the damage and we multiply it times 100, and then we divide it by 200, and then add 14. Like, I know that's not what they do, and I'm being a little bit of a jerk, but the whole like damage zone groupie, things where they wind up doing 1, 2, or 3 hit points. Like,
the
is that any worse than just giving me 100 hit points?
Yeah, the abstraction of they hit you, they do this much damage with their dice. That is bracketed into 3 different tiers, and if they break a tier, the damage that you take is actually determined by the tier that they break. So you can take up to 3 hit points a turn, but you can reduce the damage they do with armor and stuff like that.
Spending armor points, but you really only have 3 of those. Even if you have a ton more armor, you just the more armor you have, you just reduce it by more points.
So I guess maybe we should talk about combat a little bit, because we did make a video based on kind of reacting to what our perception of combat was, and now we can actually do it. So I'm going to give a high level overview of combat in Daggerheart. I have to say that first, before I begin, the combat in Daggerheart felt different, in my opinion, in a good way. It was one of those things where I feel like it's going to be a different kind of challenge, because it does put the ball squarely in the player's court for how combat works. And so how combat begins and everything goes is that the players have the ball. And so you guys get to go, you guys get to do your things, you guys get to decide how stuff is happening. And the GM is only really going to go when they have an opportunity to use a GM move. Either they roll with fear or they fail. And so, I mean, so they're the normal times that they're going to be, the GM is going to be acting is going to be limited by those situations that occur. Now, there are instances, because if you imagine if the players get on a tear and they roll success after success after success with hope, then I may not have an opportunity to go. And rather than create a moment of steamrolling where you just kind of roll over the adversaries in front of you, I can spend fear to then interrupt your move and go at a time that seems cinematically appropriate. Now, the part that I think that, that part is really interesting, because it means that, and you get a multi-attack if you want to, as long as you don't roll with fear or fail. You get to do combo attacks, as a team. So you kind of have to get out of the your turn, my turn mentality, and you have to think more macro and cinematically fun to be like, okay, well, I, go in and I do a 3-hit combo where I, try to try to brace him against the wall and smash him in the head. Okay, well that's 2 rolls. Let's see how successful you are in doing that. And then you go, okay, well I now that I've got him vulnerable, I'm going to give it to Jeff to hit him with a spell. Those kind of things. And I think you just have to kind of think about it in a much different way than D&D is like, okay, well, the NPCs are going to sit there like this is some video game waiting for you to go, until it's their turn and all that. I like it. Now, the part that got really wonky was the part that you guys are talking about, is that when you guys, were hit and the GM rolls a D20 against your evasion, so you have an evasion score. If I succeeded, which your evasion scores were horrifyingly low, it felt like it felt like
Well,
if
and they
I
were the
got to-
same.
yeah. Well, I mean, it was more than 50% of the time I was going to be hitting the players if I rolled a D20.
Well, what I thought that was interesting too is the mage had a 9 and the warrior had a 9.
Yeah. Our evasions were the same, and I thought it was more like you were going to hit us 70% of the time.
Well, yeah, because if I had any modifiers to my D20, I was hitting you guys a lot more frequently, and the damage that I did was pretty high. And what would happen is as I would roll my damage for success, I would measure it against their thresholds as they just described, and you have a minor, medium, and high threshold. And then based on where that landed, if they accepted the damage, and what that means is if they didn't spend any armor on it, that's how many hit points they would take in damage. Now they could spend armor slots, and you have a certain number of armor slots to spend to reduce it by your armor value. And as I've just described that, I've lost everybody that was not following along really closely. And I feel like that's a very big weakness for getting your first time in the game. I don't feel like after a few times it's actually that complicated, but it's like your first time getting into that. Those
Yep.
scenes where you have like algebra, calculus, and everything like that floating in the background. It's like, what the
like by the end we understood it, but it never felt intuitive to me.
And it's still weird that like it basically you only take as much damage as your highest track. Like that's still kind of weird to me.
Like you can only
There's a
ever
lot
take
about the
3 damage, right?
right, which is based on like, my class at the time. It was like if they do 15, I only take 3 damage if I don't have any armor. Versus if they did 30, it's still only 3 damage if I don't have any armor.
Yeah, it's over the threshold for the highest tier.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of a weird extraction too. But I think they're trying to, like you said, they're trying to balance out the fact like how often you go. But
the game still had a certain amount of lethality, like
a lot of lethality.
I never felt like, oh no, we're totally fine, nothing bad could happen, because in the first combat I got hit for 13 points of damage, which I had to spend some armor slots to take down, so I only took a sixth of my life instead of 3/6, half of it. But like I felt in jeopardy. So like from that standpoint, that part of the system works. But when you have something like that that's abstracted and not intuitive, I think it's dangerous, especially with new players. I think it's hard, makes it harder to learn and understand.
I felt we were in jeopardy of losing because I thought you might die, but I never thought like my character would die. Like I mean up until as long as there were 2 of us, I felt like I would survive. I felt like I would die if you went down because I wasn't doing any damage. Like they would just
if you were trying to solo, think
they would just
how long am I going to last? It's
right, because I'm never gonna because my character was
right.
never gonna do enough damage to kill one of those
right
things in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
So like my ability to be tanky was cool, but that's weird too. That one character felt really nervous about their life total the entire time, and one didn't at all.
Yeah.
That's kind of a weird balancing issue, but I mean it probably should be that way because the mage is supposed to be the glass cannon, so there probably should be some concern. And then I don't know. I still don't know how I feel about just going until you fail. I still don't know how I feel about that mechanic.
It's
as a player.
It's really I think Daggerheart could have very fast combats if you guys
or really slow combats.
Yeah, if you guys are into and you understand, if you understand the assignment, it goes fast. But I felt like it was going slow for us because, you guys were both looking at each other being like, well, I did a thing. Do you want to go? Rather than being like, okay, well, this is my plan of attack. And this is where I see it
Right.
being action rolls. Let me try to achieve this goal. And Brett being, okay, I think that's really good. And that sets me up for my own string of attacks. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that there could be some of that as you get better at that, you could make it a little bit more interesting and fun. But
Well,
what's
I
weird is
think so, because I think towards the end, we were starting to figure out that, I can push my luck. I can try to get another success. And
Yeah.
as long as I keep stringing successes together, I can keep doing neat stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately how we finally defeated the guys. But
I guess for me
it can blow up in your face.
I guess for me, it comes down to that old adage: it just sort of felt like we're rolling dice after a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm more interested in seeing like the MCDM you just hit all the time, so there's less dice rolls. I'm more interested in that at this point, just out of comparison, just because like my character could roll, like if I got lucky and I just kept rolling, like I'd still not do enough damage most likely to kill one of the
Well,
skeletons.
like your basic attack was what, a D8 plus 1, and mine was a D8 plus 2.
Yeah.
So like the basic attacks were real similar.
Yeah, which is all I had.
4th edition D&D.
Yeah, but I didn't have anything other than that.
Mm-hmm.
The trip thing that I had, the where I could make them vulnerable or whatever, that was only a D8 with no plus.
Yeah.
And that
Right, but it would have made them vulnerable, and I had something to exploit vulnerable.
I would have narratively had to have said that made it how it made them vulnerable. So there is a little bit of that about the way that you have to run combat, but yeah, like that's the thing about like if you really enjoy rolling dice over and over and over again, the game is a lot of fun. Which it was fun because it was new, but I could see that getting old after a while. Just being like, okay, I'm gonna do these 10 attacks in a row. Oh, well, I only did 5 because I failed at one of them.
Well, but I think, and maybe saying like the 10 attacks in a row may not be entirely what I mean is like the chaining of attacks. But what I'm saying is that like if you need to like you want to try to pin the two guys to the wall. Like let's say you have an
there's no reason not to, is what I'm saying. Is there's no reason not to roll until you fail. Within your
other than my fear dice or my fear balls or whatever.
Well, right, your fear balls, but then you just that's when you pass it on to another person. I mean, essentially that's what we were doing at the end. It was like, okay, roll until Mike interrupts you, basically, until there's
or you interrupt yourself.
Or you interrupt yourself.
Yeah, where you fail. But even if you fail, you could still go. Like you can still keep going. Even if you fail, you can still keep going.
But I get to do something, which may.
But you could say no, I'm not gonna.
That's never going to happen. With how little I was going, I wanted in on the action.
Well, right, but that's what I'm saying is like a person could roll, like you can have a player that rolls as much as they want until the GM says something, basically.
Right.
And that's a weird mechanic to balance.
Well, it's different because there isn't actually
says stop.
There isn't actually any more dice rolling than if you could be in D&D and attack 10 times. Just to use because we're on 10. Like in D&D 3rd edition 3.5, where you had one of those fighters that was able to chain a bunch of shit together and had 5 attacks around, you know what I mean, and magically got something where they could double their number of attacks. You're still rolling the same amount of dice you would in any other game, or rolling the same amount of times.
Yeah, but that's one person versus potentially everyone in your party being able to do it.
Yeah,
and that one person is built specifically for it. So I mean, it's just different. It's different, and I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. I would need to play with it more.
I think it would take a few more like attempts at like understanding it a little bit better because like I said, I feel like you have to really divorce yourself from the your turn, my turn mentality, but you have to do it for the like, how can I be cool and have fun with this? Like I think I don't want to say like because you mentioned gamey earlier, like it could be very gamey. You can be like, okay, well I know that with Jeff's character, if we 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we get the maximum amount of damage opportunity out of him, and then I do 1, 2, 3, then back to him. You know what I'm saying? We kind of bounce back and forth on that.
As long as we roll successes.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean,
even if we don't, like I said, even if we don't, that's up to Mike at that point.
Right, but if we fail, he gets an immediate chance to say,
"Yeah, he can."
Now all the monsters are going to go. He doesn't have to, but I don't remember a time where we failed and he didn't.
Well, that's because he wasn't going very often.
Well, yeah. Well, but
And
I
that
think
also,
it's
and then,
encouraged that I should do a GM move to make it more complicated and ratchet up the
and then
narrative.
not going very often also makes me feel like you may get, especially from newer GMs, you may get overreactions of
Okay.
I'm not doing anything, so I need to do everything.
Oh man, I
I
finally
need
get a
to
turn.
blow all. I need
Nuke.
to, yeah, exactly. I need to blow all the. I need this race.
This
These
guy's
two,
got 4 special moves. Here they
yeah, and he
come
needs to
all
do
at
all of
once.
them. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
No,
So I think there's
it's
a lot of
true.
balance that has to be done there.
It is, and I think that and like I said, it's just so alien to how my brain operated that I don't know if I don't think 2 combats is enough. I think 2 combats made me realize how it should go, but it didn't make it so I experienced how it should go, if that makes sense.
No,
Like in my brain, I
I
theoretically
don't
now
even
get
think
it.
that 2 more, like, I think we think that we know how it should go, but after
Yeah.
2 or 3 more, I think we'd be like, "No, it needs to go like this. I can't believe I didn't see it." It's very different.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. There were a few parts that I thought were a little cumbersome, but it the word I keep coming back to in my brain is you saying cinematic, Mike, because it does allow you to create some of those story moments, I think, from movies and from books. I know
Mhm.
books aren't cinematic, but you know what I mean. Or
Can be.
comics.
Yeah.
Always got to shout out the comics.
Yeah.
You know, where you can do these things that feel epic or semi-heroic, or at least the attempt to be like, even that time where I hoarded that stuff and I got it back and I was like, I'm gonna do this. And then I went, and I missed. All right. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. See, and I think that's. I
even
think
that felt like an epic fail rather than just
I can.
I'm rolling like in 4th edition where I'm rolling another attack. I
Yeah.
missed. Go ahead. I use my encounter power. I
Eldritch
missed.
Blast.
Go ahead.
Eldritch Blast. Go ahead. Eldritch Blast. Go ahead. But I think, and a part of my concern, I guess, is probably based on the character that I was playing, because like there
Yeah.
wasn't, like, he didn't have any super epic abilities. Like there was no AOE that was gonna, you know, come in clutch when it needed with that
Sure.
that specific character. So that may be coloring some of my judgment.
Well, if we needed to negotiate prices at the bazaar, though, Brent,
I would have been
you would have been
100%.
epic.
I would have been amazing.
Well,
You know,
so
you're right.
so I think, like I said, I think we have enough to have a grasp of how it should go, and it sounds like we're not convinced it's the right way to go. But what I am more impressed by is the fact that they created something that gave us the ability to go, what? How should this fucking work? This is interesting. It's an idea that wasn't something that I had experienced in another game in terms of initiative order and how to play it. So it was fun to
No,
experience.
that's pretty innovative. Their
Yeah,
initiative take is pretty innovative.
Yeah.
and
No,
so
there's things there. There's things there that got me
In a
excited.
way that makes the game feel does make the game feel fresh. Like I know
exactly.
that's what everybody was worried about, is like, does Daggerheart really feel fresh in comparison to other games?
Yeah.
And I think it does, and I think that's the tactical ability of characters to just be like, I'm gonna keep going until I fail or until I get interrupted or whatever. Like that's really different.
Mhm. And I think and the nice thing is it keeps you guys engaged if you have good teamwork about it, because you can be
Mhm.
like, if you do this, then I can use this to beat, like if Brent was like, I create a vulnerability, Jeff's like, then I can do this, and you guys can like get excited about creating those chain combinations. You know what I'm saying, and not have to worry about how you're on that initiative tracker and if I'm gonna fuck you up, because then the tension comes from, okay, well, you guys have this really cool combo.
Yeah,
Does it
there's
happen?
Well, most games don't even have that sort of like that
but
sort of thing.
there's been so many games that I've played though.
Mm.
We'll
That would
just
have
use
benefited from it.
D&D where it's like, okay, I just have to go in front of you and then I can do this and then that'll open up this thing for you.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, I rolled a really shitty initiative and you rolled a really great one. So I'm never going to go in front of you to be able to do the cool thing that I want, that I wanted to do.
Yeah. Which is usually why they suggest everybody re-roll initiative. Like most mechanics are re-roll initiative every turn, which is really cumbersome.
That's even more dice rolling. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm. So, okay, well, so I think that combat, I think we need to see more.
yeah.
It's promising because it does do some. It got us to think about something different than just your stock, like, oh, who gets to go first, all that kind of stuff. But outside of combat, then we kind of got into the meta currencies, and meta currencies for GMs, meta currencies for player. I was, the hope
There's a
system.
lot of them.
There was a lot of them, and I actually feel like the hope system with how they said it perfectly when they called it a liquid currency. It came and went fast, and what I was curious about was that in Fallout when we played that, Modifius kind of has a roll against difficulty of 0 to kind of generate action points in certain circumstances to kind of like fish for points, one could say. I didn't feel like I don't think it was encouraged in this game, but I also don't feel like it was necessary. What do you guys think about from your perspective on hope? Did you feel like dice rolls still felt natural because you didn't have to fish for the currency, or what do you think?
I didn't really feel like you needed to fish for the currency in Fallout. I know we kind of disagree on that, but I didn't really feel like that was necessary in Fallout.
I'm just saying, it was encouraged to do it. Like rolling against the difficulty 0 was encouraged in Fallout.
Yeah,
it wasn't in Conan.
Okay.
Which is where I come from on that. Is it didn't come from Conan. Like Conan doesn't ever suggest that, but I think you may get them more often when you roll in Conan. So it felt similar. It felt pretty similar to that to me. You definitely don't need to fish for it in the gamest part is when to use it and when not to. Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
No, you were spelling it out brilliantly. I think one of the things that we never fully grasped in Fallout was, yes, we should have been trying to do skill checks to farm some of it. And the thing that having played Fallout, I thought it was a little easier to manage the hope, because in Fallout, I sort of hoarded those things. Then it was like, oh, we're at our max pool size. I guess we got to spend a couple. Oh, we're at our max pool size a turn and a half later. I guess we got to spend some. And with this, I was like, you know what? Let's just see what happens if we spend it, rather than hoard it like it's the most precious thing in the world, because you reach a point where you just can't earn anymore. Right. And if you,
I think that's what made them similar. The difference being it was a combined pool in Fallout, which means we were both generating it for each other a lot.
We were both spending it.
And so we were both spending it. So that party mechanic is one of the things that I think is neat about those Modifius systems. It is neat having this as your own to just do cool stuff. But if you get a drought, it's going to be pretty. It would be interesting to see what happens if you get a drought in it. Like, you just start rolling unlucky, and like you just aren't getting hope. Like, I think you're going to run into a rough time.
It does feel if you like come to rely on it.
Yeah, it does feel like
treating it as an extra thing. Sorry, Mike.
No, I was just saying it does feel like that could lead it to a little bit of a rough time. And in this case, the GMs get the meta currency called fear. Now, there's always the argument: why does a GM need a meta currency, right? Like, if a GM wants to tell an interesting story, the DM just tells an interesting story. Why do they need why do they need to have fear points and all these kind of things to do it? And I wrestled with that a bit. Do I like it? Do I not like it? And I kind of felt like it was a clever way to get me engaged in the story, to say, okay, well, I have built up some fear points. I can add some complications to make this more interesting, because maybe the story is going, because you guys are supposed to be pushing the story, right? Like, and it's a collaborative type of thing. But now I have these fear points I can spend to go, okay, well, I really feel like this would be a fun complication to add, and I have permission to do it because of my fear points, right?
I still think you're going to run into some feels bads in some groups.
I do too.
Where you spend that currency and they feel screwed by it, especially if stuff goes bad. Like, especially if they start rolling bad, and you're like, oh, here's 4 more zombies. Or whatever. Like, that's gonna feel, and yes, a GM probably shouldn't do that if the combat's going bad, but that doesn't mean some GMs won't.
Sometimes though, the combat feels like it's going a little bit in the player's way, and you push the balance just a little bit, and then the rolls get a little shitty for a minute, and it's like, oh fuck, yeah, no, that guy's down.
Yeah. Like I said, it's this weird balancing. It's gonna be a balancing act, because like you want the combats to be interesting, but like and this is one of the reasons that I struggled. Conan has the Doom token mechanic, which is similar to this, where you can just throw tokens in to make combats harder or do narratively more challenging things. And like, that was one thing is that I struggled with, is like, it's gonna be hard sometimes for it not to feel confrontational when either the players aren't doing very well, or they start not doing very well after you do it, or like if you start to get frustrated because the combat is just going not the way that you planned, like if you get it all frustrated and you're like, oh man, they're having way too easy of a time with this, and you're just like, make this harder, and like then they start doing shitty, like it's gonna feel like you did that on purpose to win the combat, which is something that I think could burn some player groups. That's my only concern with those token mechanics. But the tactical part of it is, if you are in person or whatever, you can see what they're doing. Like you can see what's available, so you can plan for it a little bit.
Well, I think it builds up a little bit of tension too, because knowing that I have my own currency to use, and just so anybody's aware, the fear tokens can be used to do something big, tick a countdown, and a countdown is kind of like a clock where you have 8 pies to fill up or whatever. Use an adversary's fear move, like an actual fear move that they have on their card or something that you've made. Take advantage on a roll, end an effect, clear a condition, add an additional d6 damage dice, add 2 tokens to the action tracker, meaning my minions get to go more often, or interrupt the PCs to take an action, which is how you prevent the PCs from just steamrolling your cleverly crafted encounter with goblins.
Steamrolling your everything.
I just assumed that every time you spent a fear ball that I was going to hear this Dr. Evil cackle, and you were going to go, and I bring out my space laser.
Yeah. Death ray. Here we go.
Sharks with lasers on their head.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I mean, I feel like it's an interesting meta currency, and I like the idea of meta currencies, and I don't think I'm necessarily as good at using them yet, because I've been DMing for so long as just saying, well, what I say goes to the story, that I think it changes how you approach the DM a little bit, and it feels, I mean, I don't know, I hate to say this, but it feels kind of board gamey to me. Like,
it is board gamey.
Like, I mean, if it did have a map and you guys had little standouts kind of going in a map, I would be like, okay, well, I mean, what was that game? It was like Hero Quest or something like that.
It is kind of board gamey. That's exactly what you did in Hero Quest, as the guy running the thing.
Yeah, you got a similar like thing, and you did these. You were trying to stop the heroes from going down, but I don't think your objective in Hero Quest was to like make the heroes have fun. You're like, no, this is my dungeon. Get out.
Your objective was to win. Like that was when
that was directly confrontational. It was a group against one.
And I think and that's the mentality that I think you need to make sure that you don't fall into in this case. Because as a GM, like I said, well, basically it's a way to monitor the GM's I can win condition. Like I can just do whatever I want. Like now it's codified a little bit. But like it's weird for us because we've been playing games for so long where it didn't need to be codified, because we were already just balancing the combats to tell a good story. So it's trying to codify that for people.
Well,
a little bit more.
For me, using the action trackers as a way to kind of like know who's going and how I can spread the spotlight a little bit, and having the fear balls basically saying, okay, well, they've been, it seems like something should happen here, to, something big or anything like that. I think it gives some interesting visual reminders to the GM to do stuff, to go above and beyond what they have planned in some cases, or to change how the spotlight rests on the players, or, you know what I'm saying, to make it interesting. And I think it shouldn't be perceived as like I need to crush them, but it should be, how do I make this more dynamic and tense?
It shouldn't be. But what I'm saying is
good.
A, there's people that will, and B, like you could do it unintentionally. Like I said, you could be like, oh, well, this combat seems to be going easy. And again,
how about now we have a purple worm? Oh,
yeah. How about I add another couple mobs to the thing?
Yeah, but I mean, for the GMs that would do it intentionally, do you think this is a system that they would actually play? Why wouldn't they just play one of the systems that allows them to
TPK their parties all the time?
Yeah, just to TPK parties just outright. Like, I mean, it's a game designed to tell a joint story. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
it's a perception. Like, if you're a GM who feels like your stories need to be super deadly, I could see them playing this. That's the narrative that they're playing. They're playing a game that's inherently dangerous. And this game, you could do that very easily.
Right, but they do. I mean, the game does give you a few choices as a player. I mean, I was like I said, at one point contemplating my mortality and like, how am I going out in a blaze of glory?
Right.
Defending my king. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I was like,
Yeah, I know, and I'm just saying that
I don't think I'm going to try to live.
are they going to play it? Yeah, I think they probably. Some of those GMs will play it, just because. I mean, not all GMs like. I think the thing is I don't think most GMs say, "I'm playing this game to kill the players." Intentionally, that's not like their first thought.
Until
But like
they
it
get
just
puffy.
becomes a thing. It just becomes a thing.
But I do want to warn you though, and because I thought I saw it in the manuscript, is that they did say use fear collaboratively. And it is important to keep in mind when spending fear that you should never use it to undermine the fun of the players. The aim of fear is to enhance the scene, create dramatic tension, and raise the stakes, not outright shut down the heroic action the players are taking. For example, try to avoid immediately ending an effect a player has cast, even if it says the GM can spend fear to end it. So if you get me vulnerable, Brent, and you set up that attack, but you succeeded with fear, rather than me going, aha, I can spend that fear to cancel your vulnerability.
Then my challenge is why is that there?
Like I said, it's a
Well,
board game.
Well, because so like in Dungeons and Dragons, some of the stuff where it's like the status exists until a save happens, and I think we've all been on the side of, well, I failed my save again. I failed my save again. And it can happen to the DMs. I've seen it. Like then the DM has a fiat currency where they can just go, okay, you had your fun, and now it's over.
Yeah. So, but
rather than being completely random at the.
But again, that's a potential feels bad for the player. Like the player built around this vulnerability mechanic, and now the GM can just say no.
Well, no, but if you're
saying he shouldn't do that is a thing, but then again, why put it in there? That would be my challenge to the rules. Is if you have to put in there, you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should just suggest that not being an effect that you can do.
Well, and so I guess what we're saying is that what I would probably say is that in terms of like, I mean, honestly, I don't think I think the fear mechanic, and they describe it as a way to retain players' trust that what you're doing at least you're just not doing it to mess with the players. I mean, it has its purpose, but I don't think we need to. I think we're good on talking about it right now.
Well, no, I think what I would say, and this is what I realized through our conversation, is really what they're trying to do is codifies things for new GMs. Like the stuff that we do because we've run a lot of games isn't something that everybody knows. Like when to make combats more difficult just by a fiat. And this is codifying that. And that's technically why it's in there as you can do this, but you shouldn't, because it's codifying something that as a GM you could just do.
Yeah, you could always do it. Like as a GM, you just say, oh well, your effect ends. Oh, that quickly? I mean, it's kind of like when we were playing Aliens, and I think you were like, oh, I want to blow up the ship, and I said, okay, you blew it up and basically self-sacrifice. But I think you might have been surprised. We'll talk about this in our next Aliens episode, that the ship didn't immediately blow up. I was rolling a single dice to see how that was going to play out. Like and so it's one of those things that it's like because obviously GM fiat in that case is that, oh, I could just blow up the ship whenever I felt was necessary.
And that's what it's doing. It's codifying skills you build as a GM is really what the game is doing, which isn't bad. Which isn't bad as much as I make it sound like it's bad. That's not my intent. My intent is just I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate because, like I said, for us that isn't necessarily always necessary, and I do want to warn people that sometimes having something where you could just throw extra shit at people could definitely be considered. I've had it happen. In games, and it could definitely seem confrontational.
So okay, so I think we'll go ahead and put a pin in that till we get that one a little bit better, if we like it or not. I personally liked the meta currencies because I played a few games with it now, and I've been getting better at using them, and I like the challenge they provide. But I could see your points, Brent. When you're playing devil's advocate, that I mean, if your person is going in with bad intentions, it could be a way to exacerbate some of those bad intentions.
100%.
And we'll have to see. Obviously, at our table, I think if it comes down to it, it's going to be fine. Like I don't foresee.
I think it's a very good game for telling a D&D type story. Epic heroes doing epic things in a campaign that's character based more than.
I felt a little more epic at level 1 than I did in D&D at level 1.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, because you were like, the unstable burst or whatever was like, you shoot it off, licks the ground, creates a crater, blows up the enemy. You know, like I was like, wow, that's pretty good.
I felt like a bard.
brave Sir Robin.
Ish, I
Like
don't know.
you were basically going around singing the
I
story.
should have been more bard-like and tried to set things up better for you. Is what I should have
Well,
been doing.
I think next time we can use the character creator to create characters that we want to play, not characters that we. I had fun playing the character I had to play, but I still had to play her.
Flying frogs.
Yeah.
Flying
So
frogs.
I think what I would say is that the only other mechanic that we really didn't talk about are the experiences. You know, just the fact that characters don't really have a set list of skills that are modified or anything like that. And you basically just go, okay, well, you have an attribute. And then if you want to spend hope, you have an experience that you can use to modify your dice rolls. And I like the experience idea. I mean, I've liked it in other games that have used something similar, you know, but I think that the fact that you have to use hope to use it rather than just having it be applicable when it's supposed to be is a big limiting factor for when that comes into play.
It is, because you can't really. I mean, it kind of takes the place of like feats in D&D, but it doesn't apply all the time. But you can apply it much more broadly.
Yeah.
Like it isn't hyper specific. I know some feats apply to almost everything, but as long as you can narratively tell the DM why you should be able to apply the experience and you have the hope to activate it. The problem that I have is the +1 or the +2 on the die roll, like, is nice, but it's not like a game changer. I don't know.
It could definitely move the needle for you guys in terms of the fact that you're really, you know, you're 2 to 24, right? That's your range.
Yeah.
And if you're 2 to 24 and you already get a +2, you know, and you have an experience that gives you another +2, all of a sudden you're at a 6 to 28, you know, and that makes your easy number pretty easy to hit. But what I would say though is that it was interesting because I mean the chance to use those experiences I think is going to be greatly reduced because you're going to save your hope to do all the cool stuff. Unless you guys are fishing for hope, right? Unless you guys are making a lot of die rolls and generating and losing hope pretty quickly, you're going to be like, okay, well, I haven't had a combat, so I'm not going to necessarily want to waste all my hope on a possible die roll.
Well, like I said, it would be interesting to see what happens when you start doing poorly and your hope is gone.
Yeah.
And what happens?
Well, yeah, because then it doesn't matter how many you have because you can't use them anyhow because there's no way to activate them.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the only thing we really didn't talk about. I think that as a person playing the game who ran the game for the first time ever, it had huge difficulty spike getting into it, but I think it tapers. Like the tail of that is really low, like big up, fast down, and then it's like fairly easy to play. As rules said, it's rules lighter rather than rules light. So I think people can really get into it. And honestly, I mean, if I were to compare it, because we had played Candela Obscura last time from Darrington Press, and I really didn't feel as excited to play another game in Candela Obscura. Like I mean, I like the story that they told, and I like the setting that they said, but I just didn't feel like the system was inspired really. But I felt like this was a lot better. Yeah, it had a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
If you put the effort in to get over the gimmicky beginning, you can have a lot of fun games with this, even in beta, and even this may not be the final.
Yeah, stuff may change. It may be very different, you know, when they finally publish. But I'm still smiling. Okay, you can't really see it right now, but I had a lot of fun on Monday night.
It was a fun game. Yeah, it was fun.
And for it being a beta test, and for not seeing anything up to this point, I mean, I thought it was a relatively well polished game. You know, for what it
seems pretty robust, and I haven't read all of the rules.
Yeah,
a lot of stuff to buy. And if you wanted the premium, I'm sure there could be a premium version of this where you get really cool trackers on like a board that you could use to. Yeah, there could be all kinds of fun with it, but
that's true.
But I think that's enough about Daggerheart for now.
With automatic trackers,
yeah. So, but enough about Daggerheart. Why don't you guys wrap us up, send us off on into the Wild Blue Yonder or whatever.
Yeah, if you have thoughts on Daggerheart, you can share them with us on social media. We are on Facebook, Threads, Twitter or X, whichever you prefer, and YouTube. It is at Rolewise, or you can just email us all of your thoughts on Daggerheart, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And as always, thank you for being here with us. We do appreciate you giving us a listen and a watch. And as always, roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.